I'm going to ask my panelists to join me shortly. Mr. Stephen Asamoah Boateng, Professor Eric Osei-Sibe. A round of applause for them as they join me, please. I'd also like to invite the Commissioner General of the Ghana Revenue Authority, Reverend Amishadai Owusu-Amoah. Right. So, Reverend Amishadai is being represented by Mr. Dominic Nab, who is his special advisor, and he will. Mr. Stephen Asamoah Boateng, I know you'll be leaving us very early, so you can take the seat right at the very end. And then Dr. Sam Mensah, CEO of SEM Capital. Dr. Mensah? Oh, wonderful. So the private sector has been described the world over as the engine of growth for every economy, and its performance always has a knock-on effect on how well an economy does or otherwise. Now, the ease of doing business panel is the topic has been couched as resetting Ghana's economy and improving the ease of doing business. Ghana slipped 4 spots in the 2020 report. And while generally majority of developing economies did well, the gap still remains quite wide. This conversation is going to not look at the problems, but we will use the problems as a launchpad to start a thought leadership approach to dealing with them and closing that gap and hopefully improving the ease of doing business index. But more importantly, that the profitability that private sector brings to an economy is felt in our pockets. Let me quickly introduce the gentleman here. Dr. Sam Mensah is the founder and chief executive officer of SEM Capital Advisors Limited, a financial economist and investment banking expert with experience in consulting, asset management, and transaction advice on a range of financial transactions. He's worked on a number of our Eurobonds in the past. He's advised the Ministry of Finance. He's worked with the World Bank, IFC. You name it, he's pretty much done it. And I feel very privileged to be sitting with these gentlemen because I'm totally out of my depth. So I'll do my best to ask my simple questions and get on with things. For more on Dr. Mensah, please consult Google. Mr. Stephen Asamoah Boateng is a Ghanaian politician, former MP from Fantiman West, and currently he's the Director General of the State Interest and Governance Authority. And he's also served as a Minister for Local Government, Rural Development, Environment, Tourism, and National Orientation, and a man who's quite astute as far as business is concerned. So he does have a very important role to play by bringing us some insights. Now, Professor Eric Osei-Sibe, right next to me, is a Dean of International Programs at the University of Ghana. He's also an Associate Professor of Economics and holds a PhD in Development Economics from Nagoya University, a postgraduate scholar at the Brown International Advanced Research Institute, as well in the Brown University in the United States, where he studied development in inequality in the global south. He has vast experience and interest in monetary policy, banking regulations, financial inclusion, macroeconomics, and a whole lot more. So hopefully we should be able to get Mr. Nab, Dominic Nab. I don't have your bio, so you'll have the special privilege of introducing yourself and tell us a bit about you, and then we can set the ball rolling. So the microphone to your right. Yes.
I'm Dominic Nab, an Assistant Commissioner in the Office of the Commissioner General as a Special Advisor.
Okay.
I'm a Chartered Accountant and a Tax Practitioner as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So we're going to just, as much as possible, try and make this interesting. Mr. Asamoah Boateng, in my original plan, you were not going to be my first speaker. I would have come to you later, but I know you have a very important management meeting, and because this has dragged a bit, we'll start off with you, and then we can continue when you leave. So forgive me if this question sounds very redundant, but the state plays an important role in catalyzing how well the private sector works. Historically, there's been a lot of finger pointing at the state generally as slowing down the speed with which the wheels of the economy turn. What are the things that under SIGA and through the allied connections you have across government will we be seeing that will improve on the speed with which business can be conducted in Ghana?
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, as you said, I have to depart at some point. I would have loved to be here throughout. But that's why I'm taking the first shot of your questions. Indeed, the perception is there, and to some extent, you will find evidence that there is some bureaucracy which it's not acceptable in some respects in the public space or the public sector entities, and that sometimes impact negatively on the private sector businesses that goes around and help us to move the economy. And so, yes, we at SIGA has set out to deal with some of these issues. And indeed, SIGA is a new entity, or a new authority, as you may well know, just about a year and a half old. But it's a combination or merger of the old State Enterprises Commission, which existed from God knows what, from Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's time, the State Enterprise Secretariat, and it metamorphosed into the GIHOC companies, holding companies, and to the Rawlins's era of State Enterprise Commission under the PNDC Law 170. And then under President Akufo-Addo's time, we've just merged that one and the Divestiture Implementation Committee, which also disposed of state assets. And so it's a new authority, but it's got an onerous responsibility to try and oversee and administer the state's interests in all the SOEs, the state-owned enterprises and joint venture companies and other state entities. And so we have a responsibility to ensure that they work efficiently and to aid the private sector too. You can cite examples of some of the SOEs that focus is on them, such as the Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority, which is one of them. And myself and the senior minister, we've had a lot of discussion because he was also responsible for the public sector reform, which under President Kufuor, I was also a member of the team, and Dr. Indom started the whole public sector. So it's a combination of where I'm sitting and also the public sector reform to reform those entities where we believe that there is a slowdown in business activity. You may well know that bureaucracy in itself is not a bad idea. We inherited it from maybe of old, but the English actually taught us how to institutionalize it. Sometimes it's useful to be able to double check things and to be able not to lose sight of something that can pass through without your attention. So bureaucracy itself is not a bad idea, but it's when it slows down businesses, because businessmen and women don't have time to waste. Every minute you waste their time, it costs them money. It costs the nation money. It costs unemployment. And so, yes, President Akufo-Addo is very keen and was very instrumental in getting the law passed, SIGA law. And I am under marching orders to make a difference with my team. And it's to make sure that those bureaucracies are removed. I always say to everybody that I am there not to oversee them as the law says, rather I'm there to serve them. A work of public service, if you're not careful and you begin to be an overload, you get chopped down very quickly. Or there are bottlenecks which will be deliberately put in your ways. I've been a minister, I know what I'm talking about. And so you go out there not to be bossy, but you go out there to serve them and to clear the bottlenecks. Then you add value to the work they do, which is what SIGA is trying to do.
Right.
We've put all the CEOs together. We have a common platform that will work together. We created a CEO, chamber of CEOs of the public service, which I'm glad my senior brother, Dr. Seke Sapon, is a senior and the backbone of my group. And when something goes wrong, he's able to whip them in line and assist me. And so yes, I've got the responsibility to do all these things, but you also need the cooperation of the senior members of the CEOs. And this is where we are bringing to partner with the CEO Summit, so that the public sector CEOs and private sector CEOs see themselves as one team, helping basically Ghana. So there's no fight, there's no like a demarcation that here's our territory, that's your territory. We all help to create the wealth of the nation, and I can say that we are onto a good start. So far, the face of SIGA has improved tremendously. We also have cooperation from across the CEOs, and I can tell you the future looks brighter. It's not going to be business as usual. As the president says, new king, new law. We cannot set out do the same thing. And there will be sanctions, and this is the interesting part, that in the past, the overseer, which is the State Enterprise Commission and now SIGA, had not had the teeth to bite. And so, yeah, they get away with it, and everybody takes it's part of Ghana's, it's part of our business, right. Delay, but no more delays. And I can give you an example. When I entered the office at State Enterprise Commission, there were some of the SOEs whose financial statements had not been audited way back in 2011. And I was wondering how they did business when your accounts have not been audited. And so we set up with the Auditor General to try and speed up. And as I speak to you now, almost all of them are up to speed up to the 2018. Few of them are still outstanding. 2019, I've got almost half of them in. Approximately, there are the SOEs we have on our books are about 44, with JVCs about almost the same number, 42 thereabout. So in total, it's about 86, 88. And then we have the other state entities, which is not defined by the law, but we seem to understand they are the ones that have impact, the impact on what we do. And now, of the 88, over half of them have come up to even 2019 audited account, which is a plus. And it reassures government and investors that, look, we understand the business, we know your financial position, and you are sustaining yourself. Gone are the days when they used to come for bailout. The only bailout I have seen recently now is as a result of the COVID-19, where some of them, the obvious ones, Ghana Airport Company, the airports were shut, so we had to help them out. Others like the Ghana Post and all that. So, all in all, I am glad that SIGA has come to stay and is turning them around. There are good success stories. You've heard of the State Housing Company, which is now become active. You heard of the issue of Ghana Gas, where they used to employ expatriates and cost them about 3.6 million every month. Now they're using local Ghanaians. You've heard of the GMPC. Now they are moving into exploration on the water region. You know what I'm talking about.
There are clearly some green shoots.
And if they were struggling financially, they wouldn't have even had the courage to do that. So yes, things are happening, but we need to team up with the private sector to be able to speed up the process.
In that desire to work with the private sector, I'd like just one more, answer from you. If you could share with us 2 or 3 things that your unit will be doing, especially around the digitization drive. Technology is definitely changing how we're doing things. And if hitherto the perception had been that every time private sector interfaces with government or the public service, things go slow. How are you poised to use digitization as part of the government's agenda to enhance that interface between the private sector and the public sector?
It's one area that I'm very keen to get some success stories out very quickly. And indeed, we picked up the crew from the Vice President's outfit, and we have started from our side. Now, we are going live on our smart workplace. It's interestingly on Thursday. And from Thursday, internally, no paper will be moving within our setup. Then following that, we were going to engage our SOEs, and we've created a portal where their documents come to us, not by the huge files I used to read, which I cannot read all of them anyway. So I insist they give me executive summary, and then I pick and choose which ones are the trouble ones that I have to keep an eye on. The rest, I know the CEOs are okay, and I'm assured. But those I think are trouble ones, I read it myself. But then we don't need paperwork, so that we're moving this smart workplace environment. And we've been aided by, ironically, pandemic, COVID-19. We like it or not, it came to hit us hard. And quickly we had to move into the virtual realm. And so within ourselves we started. And as I said, we're going to open the portal, outside portal for them also to do that. The other areas that we also want them to do is also the payment systems within themselves, so that there's no paperwork and person-to-person interface. It will take a while because we are used to talking and meeting people, but I think we are down that road, and SIGA is leading it. We're also going to, third one is to use what we call the online monitoring and evaluation. We used to send my team out every day or going to monitor things that our SOEs are doing. Now we're going to do it real-time monitoring online. So we don't have to be around you, but we can check and see what you are up to. There are some areas we're going to physically be there. I got great code, for instance, laying high-powered cable to Burkina Faso. I got to get my team to go there physically to see that it's being done. But it's not often. We used to be every day out, but now we can do the online. So that's one of them.
Fantastic. Final point. This has to do with the Civil Service Act. Working in the civil service, my understanding of the act is it's pretty much a job for life, which creates complacency. At what point will your outfit look at potentially some sort of reform that holds employees within the public sector accountable as is done in the private sector, so that targets that people flout things, they don't get transferred to a small remote town, but that they're made to pay for their actions?
First of all, my outfit, SIGA, is not a civil service outfit. It's a public service outfit. There are differences. But I understand what the point, and we work with civil service anyway. I started by saying that bureaucracy in itself is not a bad idea, and indeed it was deliberately put in the civil service by the British. If you live in England like I did, you understand what bureaucracy means. But when it's affecting negatively a business operation, you need to clear the bottlenecks quickly. And so we've been telling everybody, especially with DCGA and those who come into contact, the chief directors, that job for life is gone. I mean, modern technology has even changed it. I came into public office from England to Ghana as a young boy, and then I noticed few things quickly. That there are people who were entrenched in their positions in the public sector. They will never move. And they will tell me, I've worked in GBC for 45 years. That's a good idea. But why are you staying in the same place? You go in and out every day and you're happy. I'll be bored. I want to change my job. But they were proud of that. But when they become too entrenched, then that's when it turns into a delay. Because they have some new tricks you and I don't know. So we need to get it into their brains that there's nothing like job for life, but also important, improve your personal development is important. By learning from other areas, you improve yourself, not staying in one spot. And so it's a change process that will take a while. I am also conscious of the Ghanaian environment. I have seen the British environment at close quarters, and I've seen the Ghanaian environment because I lived in it before I left for UK, or I was run out to UK, let me put it that way.
There was still a leaving somewhere.
I was in exile, don't worry. I know what I did. I gave John Rollins a lot of wahala, and he gave me wahala too. But I came back to help, and I'm here as a Ghanaian in my hometown, on my country, to help develop it. The point I'm trying to make is that we need to understand the context we are operating. There's some few cultural areas, cultural habits that we need to sharpen and it's easily and acceptable. Our culture is unique and rich, but if we are not careful, it also impacts negatively on businesses. These are discussions we can keep doing, and as I said, the change process is not easy to reach, but we do that. And it's not just one man, it's consciously getting colleagues to work as a team. And when you do that and you are not overshadowing them, they will listen. And that's what I try to do. I used to be a bit loudmouth and shout. Now I don't talk anymore. It's to be quiet and listen more, open my eyes and listen to those who have seen it. As I said, like my senior brother, KK Sapong, and they would tell me that as I be blacks, you also work, but it takes a while.
Yeah.
And I'm learning.
Well, thank you very much. I never thought that I'll have the privilege of saying you are discharged, Mr. Stephen Asamoah-Boateng. Thank you very much. I know you do have
grateful.
a meeting.
Thank you for the opportunity.
We're going to make the most of the rest of the time, but Mr. Asamoah-Boateng has given us some context that we can work on, and among other things. Dr. Mensah, I'd like to come to you and give us, say, one or two main things that in your advisory work you find that businesses tend to flag as hurdles that make it difficult for them to do good business in Ghana, and what you think we ought to be doing in the short term to change or create the environment where these hurdles are less an impediment to business.
Well, thank you. One or two is a bit brief because there are a lot of issues on the table for businesses.
Which ones come up more often that you feel require immediate addressing?
Okay, well, let me start with, for example, the regulatory environment. Okay, we already discussed with Mr. Asamoah-Boateng the issue of how slow government processes and systems are. So some regulatory relief would obviously be good for the private sector. The thing is that you have to regulate, if you're deregulating, you have to deregulate to re-regulate. In other words, you have to keep your regulatory systems up to date and in line with changes in the environment, especially now that we are digitalizing. And so government has to make a serious effort to upgrade and update the regulatory systems and the way businesses operate. And that's the big task, because we have several sectors of the economy. And each sector comes with its own regulatory system. Without regulation is
I beg you to keep the mic close to your chest.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
So regulation is one. One other area is the cost of finance, which has perennially been an area that has been difficult for businesses. Currently, interest rates are much too high. We've seen a moderation of interest rates lately, but it's still nearly not good enough given the environment in which we operate. I think the average commercial bank lending rate is about 21-22%, you know. And at that rate of interest, it is difficult for businesses to invest because of the fact that they would have to find projects that are generating more than the 21 or 22%, which is not difficult, it's not easy to find. So instead of investing, they would rather not invest because the rate of return on the investment is unlikely to cover their cost of finance. So cost of finance is a challenge. I think that, to the credit of the government, something is being done about that. In the proposed development or establishment of a development bank, which I believe will be start functioning in July of this year. But there's a lot that needs to be done on the access to finance. It's a big topic. It's a big topic. We can't even start to make a dent into it.
Thanks very much. Mr. Dominic Nab, I'm going to come to you last, largely because you're the only government representative on this panel at the moment. Prof. Osesibe, I know in your work as a senior fellow at IEA, you've worked on, conducted some research on the business enablement environment, the business environment. And one of the things that in that study I found was that businesses had to deal with far too many hurdles as far as taxation was concerned. Indeed, the 2020 report on doing business ranking highlighted and spotlighted that particular instance in Ghana's case, where the creation or the creation of the Get Fund levy and the National Health Insurance levy created non-deductible inputs that now became costs for businesses. It is said we can't tax our way into prosperity. How then do you propose that government creates a more enabling environment for businesses to work as far as taxation is concerned?
Thank you very much. Yes, I think this is a very useful question. Of course, taxation is very important. It's something that is necessary for our development. If we look at Ghana, I mean, we talk about high taxes, but the reality is that we're not doing well compared to our peers within the lower middle income bracket. Tax to GDP remains one of the lowest, around 13%, revenue around 16%. And of course, that definitely will deprive government's ability to, invest in critical sectors, competitive infrastructure, and other things. On the other hand, also, the business sector, talks about the fact that the tax rates are just too high. They are debilitating, kind of stifle their growth process. Introducing so many taxes. If you look at the population that is on the voters register, it's just about 17 or so million people, but just about 1.2 million pay tax. And so you can clearly see that the tax burden is very much heavy on the few, on the business sector, formal businesses and all of that. So I think that if we want to create an enabling environment, business environment that supports growth of the private sector, we should design our tax system in a way that enhances productivity and promotes growth for businesses and enterprises. What that means is that the government obviously has to be more radical in terms of collecting taxes, but the focus should not only be on raising taxes, if you ask me. It should be more or less be on base broadening the tax base, ensuring that the payers actually comply with the tax system, improving the tax administration and collection system, making it more efficient, and to me, more importantly, closing the loopholes, within the tax collection system. If you're able to do that, you may not necessarily have to raise the tax vertically. You can easily increase your tax yield by broadening, for horizontal increments of the tax. And definitely, the private sector, the businesses, the household, all of that need government to be able to collect more revenue, because if the government doesn't collect more revenue, the government is not able to invest in competitive infrastructure that will really ease doing business constraints, right? Cost of doing business is high, and much of it depends on government, expenditure. So, yes, the tax system is high. I think that government can relook at it by making sure that the tax system is more productivity friendly, production enhancement, other than one that stifles, innovations and progress and all of that, by re-engineering the entire tax system to ensuring that particularly people within the informal sector, which we've been trumpeting it for many years, just very few people, the CEOs here, the formal businesses are the ones that are paying tax. But if you go into the informal sector, which actually, contributes about 80% of our GDP, there's a huge tax gap within that sector. And more often than not, it has always been that, because the cost of collecting taxes within that sector is high, and so compliance rate is low, and you don't want to venture into that. But we're all here talking about technology. okay, deploying digitization in the tax collection process. If you're able to do that, we will be able to be more efficient in collecting taxes within the informal sector, because we are all talking about formalization of this sector to make sure that they also, do their civic responsibility, and that will mean that leveraging the digital platform that are being created, that we've so much spoken about, and ensuring that, particularly with the use of mobile money and all of that, I think is something that can be used so that collectively we can all pay taxes and reduce the burden on businesses. Because, we are talking about competitiveness across the region, across the globe. If we are able to properly take advantage of this after that we're talking about, it will hinge on our competitiveness largely. And the business enabling environment, which is taxation, is definitely one of them. So, because if you tax the business sector so much, they will not be able to penetrate into the global value chain. So, government must look at a way to restructure the tax system that is more productivity enhancing, production enhancing, that supports the private sector to unleash their potential in contributing to the growth of this country.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. Mr. Nab, I think this is the mic you have. This is working now, so you can return this. Okay, you can pause that. Mr. Nab, your organization, over the years, I recall seeing this headline every year in the papers and in our business news. You haven't missed revenue target yet. Every year you hit your revenue target. But if you look in comparison to GDP, as Prof mentioned, you're even under 15% in terms of what you're collecting. It speaks volumes of the size of your net, but it also speaks volumes of the weight of the people or the entities within that net that you tax. What steps have your unit taken to ensure that just as you deploy technology and the paperless, the ICOMS rollout, that you would see a wider net that is very efficient and also makes the burden, the process of paying tax, less burdensome for those who are willing to do so?
Thank you very much. Yesterday, my Commissioner General was here. We thought that he was going to have his day. And so he pushed all the meetings and whatnot to today. And unfortunately, he hasn't been able to make it. So I would describe myself as a glorified or elevated CEO. Okay, thank you very much. GRA has a mandate, and our mandate is to register taxpayers, to get them to file, to pay, and then to disclose their income honestly. Now, GRA collects basically two types of taxes. We have direct tax and indirect tax. Let's put it in perspective. When it comes to direct tax, it is actually a tax on profit, on income. If you don't make income, you don't pay tax. That must be situated, in context. When it comes to the indirect tax, where we have VAT and then we have the imports and what have you, that also has to do with volumes. The amount of imports that you bring in also determine how much you should pay. That should also be put in perspective. Now, having said that, we are aware that indeed not every persons actually are on the tax net. If you listen to the Vice President yesterday, His Excellency, he mentioned that because of our cash economy, it is very difficult to actually get a lot of people, to pay tax. That is quite true. And he also mentioned that government was putting in place certain structures that would ensure that we are able to actually move away from cash to cashless or cash light. Now, GRA cannot do much unless we are actually able to get all persons, into the tax net. And to do so, we need to actually look at the structure of our economy, move it from cash to cashless. There are a lot of persons that are operating in the financially excluded world. For example, masons, other artisans. They barely charge cash and do not even go to the banks to save. So it becomes very difficult for GRA to get them. Almost every time we hear, and GRA is not doing much. That is very true. But we can do much to the extent that we have information. If you don't have information, that becomes very difficult. And nobody actually likes paying tax. When it comes to tax paying, it becomes very unpleasant. Even the richest will not even want to pay tax. But you know, we have certain variables that would promote tax compliance, and that's exactly what we are doing. One has to do with ease of paying taxes, the ease of paying taxes. Now, we have decided, okay, fine, instead of just relying on cash and checks, why can't we make Momo as part of the system that would actually ensure that taxpayers are able to just pay taxes even from the comfort of their homes? That has been introduced. Again, we also think that coming to GRA offices to file our tax returns is also not the way to go. Why don't we ensure that we have online filing? That has also been done, so you can sit in your the comfort of your home and file your tax returns. Hitherto, we have this small taxpayer, medium taxpayer, large taxpayer, so that if you happen to be operating around a large taxpayer office and you are a small taxpayer, you cannot pay them. You have to locate where your tax office is. That for us was a challenge, and we have decided to just say that, look, we don't want that kind of regime. Why don't we change it? And we have now changed it to what we call Taxpayer Service Center, so that you can pay your taxes anywhere. You can file your taxes anywhere. Again, we also think that education can do. So we have launched seriously into education. You can see when it comes to the newspapers, almost every time GRA is in the news. And those of you in the media, you know GRA has now become so aggressive, as if tax paying is actually trying to cajole taxpayers. It's a law, it's a creation of law. But we think that we cannot use force, as it were, to be able to collect taxes. We should use persuasion. Let people know why they are paying taxes so that they can willingly, pay tax. So we do that. We also think that we should also have what we call customer experience. That is trying to make tax paying less tasking. That is also an area we are looking at. We should be able to talk to the taxpayers to appreciate why they are paying taxes, when they should pay tax, and why they should pay tax. And we think that if they are able to do this, then it will help us. When it comes to tax, environment, let's also appreciate the fact that it is actually a shared responsibility. Even though GRA has been given the mandate to collect taxes, we also think that other institutions should also help in that regard. Now, having said that, we must also appreciate the fact that government has put in place certain incentives that actually are very helpful in terms of tax compliance. Take, for example, manufacturing. If you are a manufacturer, you are located in Accra, you pay tax rate of 25%. If you move to the regional capitals, you pay tax rate of 18.75. So there's a rebate of 25%. If you go to any other area, you pay tax rate of 12.5. So there's a rebate of 50%. You see, whether we like it or yes, Ghana has become a very small, place because of technology. You can produce in WA and bring your goods here to sell. So this is something that we can take advantage of. Again, government has also introduced what we call the young entrepreneur, incentive. If you are a young entrepreneur, you are into manufacturing, you are into agro-processing, you are into farming, you are into horticulture and medicinal plants, you are into tourism and creative arts, you are into waste processing. It says that for the first 5 years, you will not pay tax. And when you are located in Accra, you pay tax at the rate of 15%. If you are located in regional capitals outside the northern savannah northern regions, you pay tax rate of 12.5. If you are in any other area, you pay 10%. If you are in the northern regions, you pay 5%. That's also an incentive for young entrepreneurs. So for me, I think that perhaps it has to do with knowledge of where one should go to actually leverage on the tax opportunities that are in there. Yeah, to leverage on tax opportunities that are in there. Yes, again, when it comes to the tax compliance, there's something we call a unit we have created in GRA called the high net worth. A unit. And that this unit tries to look at persons that are highly profiled, making so much money, yet they don't pay taxes. They are always able to bulldoze their way through with calls, with this. So that unit would actually follow this and also ensure that we are able to get such persons, interview them properly, get to know their source of income, and tax them appropriately. We have also instituted what we call the informal awards. If you come to GRA to tell us about taxpayers or potential taxpayers who are making income and they are not paying. We'll give you a reward and also ensure that you are protected. So today, just before I came here, somebody came with a letter telling us about a potential taxpayer that's not been paying, that is making money. So we would zero in on that to ensure that we are able to get the taxes. And at the end of the day, he's also going to be rewarded, for that.
Okay. You've pointed out some stuff that you've done that you believe are helping, and I believe quite a number of them, if not all of them, are useful. If I look to dial back a moment to this very last example you gave, I mean, there are so many people who are going to be bold enough to take up that offer. Secondly, you can't be everywhere. But technology, which we all agree, can go everywhere. Tell us what you're doing as far as leveraging technology to widen the tax net and, more importantly, make it easy for people to pay their taxes.
Thank you very much. Hitherto, everything of ours was manual, which we are aware. And we have, COVID-19 has actually taught us a very great lesson. Last year, you see, you mentioned in your introductory remarks, you mentioned that GRA every year has been making its target. That is not quite true. Last year, we met our target. In fact, the target was about 42 billion Ghana cedis. We made 45 billion. That is a significant deviation of 6%. Unprecedented, especially in the era of COVID-19. What did we do differently? What we did differently was to leverage on technology. So, what we said was, okay, fine. During this, can you pay via using the banking system? Bankers draft, bank guarantees, and Momo. Can you also file online? So all these things were done. We're able to determine the liability, and then would give information via emails and whatnot. So for us, we think that if we don't actually leverage on technology, there's no way we can make it. Now, this era has also pushed businesses into what we call the e-commerce and cyberspace. Whether we like it or not, that's not what is happening. You just sit in the comfort of your home, you make a call, bring me Wache, and Wache is bought. You pay online, and that is what it is. Now, if we do not actually look at that area critically, there's no way we can ever meet our target. So e-commerce is also another area we are looking at, carefully. And for us, we think that the technology we have is actually an enabler. We have to rely on this because GRA, our mandate is to collect taxes. We have to rely on the existing technology. And we also do know that when it comes to infrastructure, to actually ensure that we are able to rely on technology is actually a problem. And fortunately, the Minister of Communication mentioned that some works are being done. So for us, yes, the little that is there, we will leverage on that, hoping that there will be an improvement for us to actually make it big.
Thank you very much. Dr. Mensah, I'd like your thoughts on the incentives for tax rebates to stimulate, of course, we need to see some recovery of this economy post-pandemic. Is it just about issuing or creating a policy that gives rebates? What are some of the things that you think ought to be present for us to start seeing some young entrepreneurs boldly saying, you know what, I'm going to somewhere beyond Secretary or so to go and set up an industry because I will benefit from these incentives that have been, put at my disposal by the GRA, for example. But what else should we see happen beyond just the policy of tax rebates?
Well, I think tax incentives are generally accepted as an effective way of incentivizing the private sector. But we do have a lot of tax incentives on our books that don't actually produce the kind of incentives that we want. We want companies, we want our growth to be investment driven. So we give very comfortable capital cost allowances and so forth. We don't see the result, which obviously indicates that there are some missing components in this incentive structure, which may not necessarily have anything to do with tax. I mean, government, for example, has to provide the relevant and needed infrastructure base for the entire economy and for the private sector to basically ride on. We're looking at things like the educational system that enables us to generate the skills that we want. That's very important. We're looking at the establishment or the building of digital highways. There are still a lot of places in Ghana that do not have connectivity and are not economical for the private sector to actually go and put in the connectivity. I mean, in all of those cases, government has to step in to provide the necessary digital highways that are needed. Other infrastructure, roads, and generally just the mobilization of mentoring expertise for the youth who want to go into business. So I think that the tax incentives are relevant, but they are only one tool in what has to be a big basket of several tools to incentivize the private sector, particularly the youth.
I'm very happy you mentioned these. Professor Osesbe, according to a UN report, by 2030, 7 out of 10 jobs globally will be, the developing economies will be provided by SMEs. We have a large pool of SMEs if you look at our productive sector. Do you feel that government has done enough in the macro space to allow the entrepreneurial private sector to take full advantage of the potential size of this economy by way of output?
I think that one area that we haven't focused much in terms of the tax collection is local government authority system. And I don't know the policy direction now, what governments or the GRA are doing to step up efforts within the local government system, because there's a lot more potential in that area where we can leverage to increase the local economy, to promote investment within the local economy. If the municipal assemblies, the local authorities are empowered, to collect taxes and use the taxes to invest in that local economy, it will go a long way to, to boost that local economic system and promote investment. We're talking about property taxes. It's one thing that we've been talking about. A lot of properties around, the local government system is not able to collect, GRA is not able to collect, and so fine houses in all the localities and urbans really are not able to business operating permits. The local governments are unable, to provide this. And even talking about charges for parking, these are taxes that are being used by developed countries, to develop the local economy. What is it that GRA is doing, to strengthen the capacity of the local government authorities to be able to collect taxes, not only to collect, but also account for the taxes that they collect to the benefit of the people.
A very interesting point you raise, because if you the literature on devolution is very clear. It's not something we need to invent. In fact, if I recall, the current Minister of Finance talked about property taxes some years ago. It's amazing that we haven't seen something like that being done. What would you say has been, the reason why this has not happened?
Thank you very much. I think that we have to actually put things in perspective. When it comes to tax administration, that is GRA. GRA, we don't meddle in policies, we don't meddle in issues which have nothing to do with tax. Property tax, yes, it was actually mooted some time ago. It has died down. For us, we collect...
But the law has not died. The law exists for you to do that.
I'll come there. We collect income tax. So rent, yes. When it comes to property tax, that is the assemblies. They do that. We don't collect that. Okay. But we collect rent tax. And what we have done is that because they are locally based, the assemblies and whatnot, they really have, handle on locations of property.
Okay.
So we are partnering them to actually help us be able to commercialize. That is what we are doing. When it comes to road tolls and whatnot, GRA has no mandate there. So once we don't have mandate, we cannot actually also suggest how those things should be used. But I think that is a very useful intervention he has made. And I believe there are government functionaries here that would listen to them. When I get back, I can also tell Commissioner General, then maybe we would suggest it to the minister. I think it's very laudable.
Okay. As special advisor to the Commissioner General, we hope that you do carry this. I'd like to, we've got very little time left. I'd like to open the conversation up. If you have some great ideas you'd like to share, or a question or two, I think I have room for about 4. So please just put your hand up. We'll get a microphone over to you. Okay, so I have a gentleman right to my right. Sure. While we get the microphone over,
government has passed a law on what we call amnesty on interest and penalties. And what it is that if you have any taxes unpaid, the law says that try and pay those taxes, and if there are interest or penalties, it will be forgiven to you. We have up to September to actually do that. So please, let's take advantage. Any person, if you have any tax standing in your books, there is an opportunity here. Apply. There are forms on our website. Download, apply, submit, and then we'll look at it, and then they grant you the exemption from interest and penalty.
Okay. Thanks very much. Okay, so I have a question over there.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Your
Good
name
afternoon.
and then your question.
Good afternoon. My name is Ike. It's not a question, more like a suggestion.
Sure.
To widen the tax gap for the base. Some years ago in Lagos, the governor of the state invited artisans to a meeting.
I'm struggling to hear you on the monitors. I don't know if
Hello?
everyone in the room could hear you. Yeah, so lean in a bit.
Is that better?
project. Much better. Thank you.
Okay, so the governor of the state invited artisans to the state house, and they all have associations. Whether you're a hairdresser, whether you're a vulcanizer, they all have associations. So he invited them, and he asked, so you in this sector, how many are you, in Lagos State? They said, 500. You in that sector, how many are you? They said, 2,000. And you, 5,000. And he asked, so how much do you charge to cut your hair? How much do you charge to pump a tire? How much do you charge for your services? And he did a rough calculation and said, okay, so if there are 10,000 of you, we charge 2,000 or 200. This is how much revenue you guys make in a month, in a week. And he now decided, okay, so we're going to tax all of you a certain amount, okay? And they're all like, okay. But he said, you have to pay tax. You guys are earning money, and we are providing services for you, and none of you are paying any tax. So right there and then, he was able to arbitrarily say, based on the law that we have, you guys have to pay a certain amount of tax so that the states can actually make more money. Now what happened was immediately, next time I went to cut my hair, they'd increased the price slightly. But that was a strategy that he used. So sometimes you need to be a bit drastic in your attempt, to widen the tax gap. Because people won't do it voluntarily. You need to think a little bit out of the box to get it done.
Thank you very much, Ike. I like that. We have, many associations in this country. Artisans have great associations, so it's definitely an area to look at. Do we have any more questions? In the absence of that, I have just one final question, which I will put to Dr. Mensah and Professor Smith. So, in our bid to restructure our economy and all the recovery programs that the World Bank and IMF would propose, some of it has actually created very little, more rigidity in the taxation environment. For example, the restructuring of our VAT, for example, was a part of that economic recovery program. And so, if we agree that taxation will not be the way to catalyze productivity, why should we continue playing ball with these things that pretty much create an albatross around our necks? all these great ideas that come from the multilaterals say, oh, maybe you should collect a little bit more taxes. Now we've got the fiscal stabilization. In addition to that, we have the banking sector. Now we've got 1% COVID-19. That's in addition to the VAT, which already, was at 17.5. I mean, how do we create an enabling environment where the taxation is targeted and proactive, peculiar to our needs, and not because some IMF or World Bank says we should go that way?
Very interesting question. I mean, the reality is that, the strength of our fiscal is actually what determines how quickly we can run and how far we can run. If you don't have fiscal stability, you have a problem. There are a lot of things that we talk about and expect government to provide. But we cannot, it's not possible for government to provide all those things because they are in a fiscal jam. Currently, about 70% of the revenue that we generate goes into debt, interest payments, and then compensation of employees. So you only have 30% left for goods and services, as well as capital expenditures. Now, capital expenditures have been only on average, about 10% of total government expenditure. So we want to expand our infrastructure base, roads, digital highways, etc. But there's no space to do it. It doesn't matter how loudly our politicians are claiming that we are building this road and that road. There's just not enough. Okay. So we have a problem, and I think what government needs to do is to have a unifying message, rally the country behind a credible deficit reduction plan. So it's only by doing that we will get to a point where now we have the space, the fiscal space, to be able to build more roads, to be able to support the private sector with more facilities, etc. But until we get to that point, there's going to be a lot of noise. And then there will always be a shortcut to increasing taxes will always be more attractive, rather than expanding the fiscal capacity of our economy.
Wonderful, thanks. I really like that. Professor Sebe, let me tweak that a little bit, borrowing from Dr. Mensah. This multi-stakeholder rallying call behind one common vision. Learned something new earlier this week. Something about a quadruple helix, where it's a model of innovation where government, academia, industry, and the general citizenry will decide on something that needs to be done and work at. Let me rephrase. How do we ensure that going forward, this stakeholder engagement is one that yields better results? So the citizen understand where we're going, the deficit reduction program can be, because it means tightening our belts, right? So how do we ensure that citizens rally behind the government in a case like that?
First, I think it's about building trust, right? The private sector should be able to trust government to deliver on its mandates and its promises. The citizenry, government must also trust the citizens and then the businesses to also honor their civic responsibilities, right? Because the whole idea of economic development is a shared and collective responsibility. Okay, we talk about a shared burden, and at the same time we talk about a shared prosperity. You understand? Which then gives the responsibility of building a state, not only to government but to every individual, that lives in a place. And so there's a need for the private sector, for businesses, and for government to put their shoulder, on a hill to really think through some of these problems. Paying taxes, of course. Nobody wants to pay taxes. And I've said that taxation should not be the one that kills businesses. It should be the one that, promotes businesses. Because tax is not only about revenue generation, it's a tool for economic development in many cases, right? And so if both sides see it in that way, government see it as a way to provide that kind of tax structure incentive regime that helps businesses to, thrive, and also use the taxes that is collected to invest in the economy that supports the business environment, to thrive. Of course, that is government giving back to businesses, and businesses see it that way as, if I don't pay my taxes, government will not be able to get the needed revenue to do this. And so they also would have that realization to paying their taxes, household paying their taxes in a way that help each other to build, economy that is a shared burden and shared prosperity. So it's a collective effort, in order to be able to do that. And that will definitely be made if each actor trusts, one another. The act of trust is key for this to happen. And so the private sector should be able to know that if I pay my taxes, government is going to ensure value for money, is going to use that taxes to put into building infrastructure, competitive infrastructure, reliable energy, road, railway, and other. That will really, I will not really mind putting my business in Tamale because I know that the road network is seamless. I will not mind putting my business in anywhere or any part of the country. In that way, I'll feel freely and happy paying taxes. That is how the collaborative effort comes into. It's about trusting each actor in the economy. Okay. It's a big responsibility.
Trust clearly is a big deal. I want 30 seconds each from you, starting with you, Dr. Mensah. And this has to do with one topic we have not mentioned in all of this because it does affect the ease of doing business. It's the animal we like to call corruption. In 2018, we lost more than $3.8 billion that we've gone borrowing just because of corruption. My own cursory study of the Auditor General's report from the year 2004 to 2012, without doing any composite interest build-up on that, at the ministry's department and agency alone, by the conversion I used at the time, index dollar to city index, we had lost over that period more than $3 billion. So we're hemorrhaging quite a bit. I want from you in 30 seconds, however outlandishly, radical you think it should be, how do we fix the corruption burden?
I think we all realize that it's a very complicated subject. There are many dimensions to it, and we can come at it from so many ways, from so many angles. But there's one thing that I believe we've not really paid enough attention to, and I think a lot of the corruption, underlying a lot of the corruption in our system is the way that we finance our politics. Because there's an incentive in the system to overload what we charge the government so that some of this money can find its way into party financing, financing campaigns, and so forth. So I think that if we are able to make some progress in terms of making more transparent political financing, it will make a difference.
Thank you very much. Succinctly put. Mr. Dominic Nab, your 30 seconds of how we can fix corruption.
Yeah, I think that we probably have to look at our legal architecture. Yes. If you look at the law, it says that if I give bribe and you take, more offense I do, I will not come and tell you. Our law should be such that if I take, are you getting it? Then you can report me that I have taken.
But if I give because I feel that somewhere intrinsic in this interaction, it would ease the process.
No, you see, so
you take, who then goes to report?
That's the point. So we need to look at our law.
Okay.
And rather punish persons who take, rather than persons who give.
That's interesting. That's radical enough. It's worth looking into. Feel free. I think the applause is welcome. Thank you. And then my final 30 seconds from you, Prof.
Well, I don't think it's an easy fix. It's not an easy fix. I mean, we have to be real. But I think that if we allow the PFMA, the Public Financial Management Act, to work, obviously we will, do good with reducing corruption in this country. We have this fine policy that really tackle every aspect of the payment system and public financial system. But many a times we tend to step it aside and then do our own thing. Largely to do with the procurement system that we have. I believe that the public procurement should be a tool for innovation in really driving the economic development and supporting the private sector, other than being a tool for corrupt activities. And so we really have to look at the entire procurement system, because that is where the chunk of corruption issues, are. And so if you are able to dismantle that and see where the loopholes are that, give people the incentive, to corrupt themselves, we need to tackle those things and then we'll be good.
Fantastic points raised, and we all know that government does not procure from itself, it procures from the private sector, so we have a role to play in that. Thank you, Professor Eric Osesibe, Dean of International Programs at the University of Ghana, Mr. Dominic Nab, who is a Special Advisor to the Commissioner General at the Ghana Revenue Authority, and Dr. Sam Mensah, Founder and CEO of SEM Capital. Ladies and gentlemen, these have been your panelists, and I hope that it's been worth your while. And over to you, Jerry. Thank you.
And many thanks to you, Insurado, for seamlessly moderating this panel on the economy and ease of doing business. For me, it's been a delicate walk through incentives and challenges. And finally, we've inherited the last bit of the conversation on corruption.